Hi, we're Option Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions.
Welcome to the Shoe Room, Andrew.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Can you please tell people who you are and what you do?
So my name is Andrew Shirley, and I'm head of rural research and also a bit of luxury research at Knight Frank, which is, as many people know, a global real estate business.
Super exciting job title. Can you take us through your career content page? So if you walked up to the bookshelf, you pull down the Andrew Shirley book, open it up, what is those main chapters that got you from where you grew up to where you are today?
Do you want me to start right at the beginning?
Yeah, please.
So I'm 51, so it goes back, quite a long way these days. But I come from a farming family, but we don't actually have a family farm. My mum's a farmer's daughter in Buckinghamshire. So as soon as I was about 16, didn't even have my proper driving license for a car, but I was allowed to go and help on my uncle's farm. So during haymaking, driving tractors tedding the hay and helping stack all the bales. But bear in mind, this was before we had really big bales. They were sort of the little bales that you would handle by hand, and they weren't these posh air-conditioned tractors. So tedding and making hay with all the sort of pollen coming in. It was about the same time that I sort of started developing hay fever. So it was really kind of interesting, but really, really rewarding, because it was sort of proper hands-on farming. It was also a dairy farm as well, so I'd be scraping the yard, helping with the milking. So that was kind of what sort of inspired my interest for farming and agriculture. And after that, after my A-levels, I went off to agricultural college at the Royal Agricultural College, now obviously the Royal Agricultural University, and studied a degree in crop technology there, which was offered by the University of Bath as well, because this was kind of before scientists could even do degrees, so showing sort of how far back.
And did you have a career trajectory in mind at that point?
Well, I was really interested in journalism and writing. And actually, I wanted to be the foreign correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, or one of those sort of big newspapers. And when I went to some of these career fairs at the college, and I think I was talking to someone from Dow Gettys or whatever, and he said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "That." And he said, "Oh, why are you talking to a animal feed company or something like that?" But I knew I wanted to travel, and probably not actually, there was no family farm I was going to go onto and farm, but I wanted to be involved in agriculture in some ways, and quite a lot of our course was tropical agriculture, so we'd sort of studied what farming in Africa and that kind of thing. And it was a sandwich course, and I was lucky enough that a former student had got a job in Thailand for a sort of natural resources company, and he offered the opportunity to go and do part of your sandwich year there. So I ended up working on a shrimp farm on the Cambodian border.
And was that the first sort of proper travelling you'd done at that point?
Anywhere probably tropical. Obviously, we used to go on family holidays to France and within Europe. But yeah, that was the sort of first big adventurous trip on my own, and that was probably my first sort of introduction to agriculture and the environment, because all of these shrimp farms were cut out of the mangrove forests on the eastern side of the Bay of Thailand. So pretty much an environmental disaster, and to keep shrimps alive in this sort of intensive situation, they were pumped full of antibiotics and stuff like that.
Did you recognise that conflict at the time, or only with hindsight you've looked back and gone, okay?
Well, you could sort of recognise that something was going on, but I was so excited to be working overseas. I hadn't really done my research, into what was happening. But to harvest the shrimps, you would basically drain down the ponds, and all the water from the ponds would, complete with all the antibiotics and whatever, would flow into the Bay of Thailand. So it's not, it's not a great environmental story. And what was really interesting was that they were Japanese tiger prawns that would be air freighted straight off to Japan for sort of high-end restaurants. So we weren't actually allowed to eat them. But at the bottom of these shrimp ponds, because there'd been so much food pumped in, you'd get these giant mutant crabs about so big that we were allowed to eat. So we got to eat these amazing
mutant crabs,
these sorts of seafoods that were sort of living at the bottom of these shrimp ponds. But what was quite interesting, actually, just to sort of digress if you don't mind, but I've just been reading this book called Very Bad People, which was written by the team that set up Global Witness, which specifically looks at environmental issues that are sort of driving government corruption. At the same time, I was on a shrimp farm in Thailand, which was literally just on the border with Cambodia. They were actually in Cambodia exposing the illegal logging trade, which was funding the Khmer Rouge's civil war in Cambodia, which A, I'm slightly embarrassed I didn't know about at the time, and B, I'm glad my mum didn't know about, because her son was sort of on the edge of a sort of illegal logging and
International incident.
war zone. But yeah, so it's really interesting how agriculture, has always sort of tied in, with the environment, and not necessarily in a good way in a lot of cases. So yeah, that was my sort of sandwich year at university. So
and then after you came back and finished it?
Well, had the travelling bug. So my first job after university was for a tobacco company, working in first of all Zimbabwe and then Kenya. So helping people grow tobacco, and again, lots of interesting environmental angles there, because once you've harvested your tobacco, you have to cure it, and to cure it you need wood for the little sort of furnaces that heat up the tobacco barns. And in rural Kenya, the farmers that I was working with, because it was quite small scale, they were basically chopping down the indigenous forests to do this, so there weren't many trees left. And one day the company that I worked for, the chief exec or the chairman was doorstepped in his London pad by a journalist saying, well, you do realise that your tobacco company is encouraging the deforestation of lots of African countries. So straight away there was a tree replanting project that was started. And of course, what did they plant? Well, they planted eucalypts because they're the fastest growing and they burn well and whatever. And of course, then it was realised actually they don't really work particularly well in African soils. They suck up a lot of water, damaging the smallholders' other crops. So when I was there, we were planting a lot more sort of local indigenous trees like neem trees and all of that sort of stuff to try and redress the balance. So throughout my career, I seem to have been sort of stumbled across these interesting sort of conflicts between agriculture and the environment that, in some ways, you tried to sort of try to redress.
We shall come back to more of those as we progress on. So after the tobacco role?
So I was in Africa for about 5 years or so.
And did you enjoy living there?
Yeah, I always think Africa's a little bit like malaria. Once it gets into your blood, you can never quite get rid of it. It's always there. And even though I was only in Africa for five years, and it was probably a quarter of a century ago that I was actually there, it still sort of feels part of me. And my job at Knight Frank, we've got offices all over the world, including Africa, and I've been lucky enough to go back
like
to.
It happened at a really sort of informative part of your career, that really early on, where it could have a big impact on you.
Yes, yeah, you're probably right. I was a sort of young man open to new ideas and adventures, and there you were, kind of living the boy's own adventure in Africa. Because when I was in Kenya, I worked in Western Kenya near Lake Victoria, and in a straight line, the quickest, well, not the quickest, but the shortest way to get to where I lived was to drive through the Masai Mara. So I would just go from Nairobi, drive through the Masai Mara, down all these terrible tracks and rutted roads, and see all these amazing animals. So yeah, that kind of stuff does leave a bit of an impression on you. And again, you go to the Masai and you just see this conflict between humans and wildlife, because the sort of population is increasing and it's encroaching on the borders of these game reserves, and having quite a big impact. So it's really interesting.
We often talk about people are the most invasive species out there, right? We've found our way to get to virtually everywhere in huge numbers.
Yes, but obviously you can't ignore the people, can you? And it's very difficult when you've got populations that are growing, people struggling to ends meet, for them to see that people are prioritising the animals rather than them. So you do need to find solutions that involve people as well as just the animals.
That's why we talk about positive impact for environment and social issues, because if you only do one, the other inherently suffers in an unsustainable way anyway. Okay, so next role when you returned to the UK? Was it straight back to the UK from Africa?
Yes, yeah, it was. I think I touched on that. I'd always enjoyed writing. One of the things I'd done in my sandwich year, John Deere sponsored a little agricultural journalists course, which I did. Came back and got a job pretty much straight away at Farmers Weekly on their business desk, and also that which involved the property, being the property correspondent as well. So writing lots of stories about milk prices, and it just happened to be the time of foot and mouth, actually, not long after I joined. So when the countryside was shut down as well. So that was a really sort of interesting perspective on how farming, can actually influence way more than the environment.
You have like almost a Forrest Gump-esque narrative through environmentally challenging and conflicting sort of issues throughout the career. You've been lots of different places with different sort of
there's
difficulties around the environmental
There's
space.
definitely been a common theme running through all of my jobs. Yeah.
So how long did you stay at Farmers Weekly?
I was there for about 8 years.
Okay.
So that was good. Got to visit some of the, as a property editor, some of the UK's most interesting properties. One of the properties that was sold was, Madonna and Guy, Rich's estate, Ashcombe. I was there when it was on the market before they bought it, so I can claim I've been in Madonna's bedroom. Liz Hurley's farm that she bought in the Cotswolds. I had a look around that before she bought that as well. So likewise, so it's just a really interesting sort of view on many of these properties that sort of quite famous people have bought as well.
And then was it Tonight Frank after Farmers Weekly?
Yes, because I was sort of property correspondent at Farmers Weekly. That tied in quite well. Knight Frank was looking to sort of bolster its research team, so I was asked if I wanted to join that as its head of rural research. So.
And what does your role look like from a day or a week-to-week basis, whatever time period you want to talk about?
Well, that's quite interesting. I mean, one of the first things I did when I joined Knight Frank was take over editing a magazine we do called the Wealth Report, which is our sort of global thought leadership piece, nothing to do with rural, but this was around 2008 when, the global financial crisis, everyone was retrenching, and they said, we need someone to do this. You can string a sentence together, you're a journalist.
You arrive at Farmers Weekly at the time of foot and mouth. You arrive at the Wealth Report at the time of the global financial crisis. It's fascinating timing.
It's interesting. Yeah, sort of foreseeing interesting events. And I suppose I left Zimbabwe just after, all the sort of the land reform there. Yeah, I hadn't actually thought.
Fascinating background.
I hadn't thought of it in that way actually. But yeah, that's. So I was doing the Wealth Report, which sort of started off as a fairly sort of small, pamphlet-y type publication, and built it up into our sort of leading thought leadership publication. And I did, as part of that, got to interview some really, really interesting people. A lot of them sort of conservationists, like Anders Poulsen, the Danish conservationist. I was lucky enough to get an interview with him. A guy called Jochen Zeitz, who's a German guy who's got some big conservation rewilding projects in Kenya, and was a big driver behind the B Corps, I think, worked with Richard Branson as well. So, I was lucky enough to be able to sort of steer these sort of publications and the articles in the direction of some of the topics that I like to write about.
Really proud of that publication.
Yes, if you ask anyone in the world of real estate or sort of banking or private finance, most of them will have heard of the Wealth Report.
Yeah, we are.
So that was good. And as part of the Wealth Report, I know you might want to touch on it later, I sort of set up our luxury investment index as well, tracking the value of these things that our clients like to collect, including classic cars and wine and all of those sorts of things. And I sort of still do a lot of that, interviewing interesting people. So my job can be quite varied. Sometimes it's compiling our farmland index, or at other time it's, I might go and try and interview someone for one of our publications like the Rural Report or even the Wealth Report, which sort of takes me sometimes all over the world. I've interviewed conservationists in Africa or up in Scotland, or the Bowls on the Knepp estate. So I've been lucky enough to talk to some really interesting people, and a lot of it's around. I try and make it around land. Because my role as head of rural research, and obviously anything to do with land and agricultural farmland now is becoming more and more about conservation and natural capital. So it's just a topic that really interests me, and I've been lucky enough to interview some of the the pioneers in that world.
When you set out to write something that is going to be a thought leadership piece, Is your approach to that topic in terms of structuring it and finding out about it different than if you were interviewing something or more of a publicity piece around a property or something? Do you approach the task differently?
I suppose there's commonalities. It's really interesting when I was looking at your website to see that you have a head of storytelling. And I think, what journalists do, or good journalists do, it is all about storytelling. It's not just facts and figures. So when you're researching a story, you want to find out about the people that you're going to be interviewing. What are their stories? What's taken them to where they are? And I think, that can be the same whether it's a house or it's a conservationist, because, the house will have a history that you want to find out about, like Ashcombe, Guy Ritchie's estate, it was home of Cecil Beaton. So, the photographer. So, everything has a story, and it's trying to find those stories, trying to find those angles to make your stories really come alive. So that would be always my approach to trying to write an article.
It's the difference between looking at an oil painting and a print. You look at an oil painting, there's texture, there's brush strokes, there's depth to it. You look at a print, it's flat. If you find the story and find the bits to bring it to life, there's just so much more to it to take in.
Well, I've just interviewed a really interesting person whose father started collecting maps and atlases, and these are really rare, really old ones. So I was lucky enough to go and meet her in the apartment in London. She's got some of these books. These are books going back to the 1400s that she was sort of flicking through and showing me. And there's so much interesting about them because these are some of the first printed books. So you can see, this was the first sort of copperplate book, and you can see its printing process, and it's really smudged, and some of these are wood prints. So as well as telling the history of cartography and how people viewed the world, because obviously these maps are very different to what we would see call a map now. You're actually seeing the whole history of printing in that as well, and it's the whole history of exploration, how people saw the world. And a lot of these maps are quite political as well, because it was how the benefactors or the sort of people who ruled these countries at the time wanted other people to see the world. So it's it's so fascinating. Everything has stories behind it.
Totally. So you perfect segue into my next question, which is around, we live in a digital world now where an article can appear on LinkedIn in a second. Every document's flying around all over the place. Do you think there's still a role for print media and a physical document?
It's a really interesting question, because when I started at Farmers Weekly, which is about 25 years ago now, everyone was talking about it was the end of print. All the focus was going to be on digital. But if you look now, Farmers Weekly is still going strong. Country Life is still going strong. I think there's more printed content now than there ever has, because people like, they like the production values, they like the amazing photography, they like just
you think it's the texture, right?
Feeling, and I've got a colleague. The first thing she does when we get one of our magazines back is she'd like to smell it, because you've got that resonance with
everyone around the room's nodding. Yeah,
resonance with something, and that's not to say that there's not a place for digital content, because there is, and it's an amazing platform to be able to share ideas. But to me, there's still something about hard copy journalism. It's amazing, the number of people you go and see, and actually you'll see, maybe if it's even in the loop, but they've got a copy of a report that you produced a couple of years ago, but they're still reading it, they're still referencing in it, and it still hangs around. I mean, unless you're super organised, it's really hard to find a website story that you read, because there's just so much digital content. So, and I think people, there's something special about reading something in a magazine, isn't there? You've got that combination of words and pictures, and it tells a story. Whereas you dip into websites, and if you've got children, on their YouTube, it's just a
transactional, right?
It's just a continuous flow of not necessarily linked stories. There's not a particular, there's no narrative necessarily to it, which you can create in a magazine, which I think is still very valuable. I think people still do value that, because it's and you can take a magazine anywhere. I know you can take your smartphone anywhere, but it's sitting on the phone in bed. Sit in bed looking at your phone. It's
if you are going to read a book, how do you read? Are you a physical book person? Are you an e-book? Are you an audio book? How do you like to consume it?
My wife keeps trying to buy me a Kindle, but I still like to read real books when I go on holiday.
Yes, I'm exactly the same. I like a physical book.
I like a suitcase of. I don't have the opportunity to read as much as I would like to, but when I do get the chance, I'll sit down and just chew through books. Very quickly.
Late to reading, so first person in my family to finish school, never mind uni, so reading was not something that was necessarily encouraged at home. Books weren't around really in the sort of, that would seem so counterintuitive to my kids because the house is full of them, but they weren't. And I only started reading when went on holiday with my now wife for the first time and complained about being bored. She threw a book at me and said, "You can't complain until you've read this." And that really connected me with books. And since,
can you remember what the book was?
I can, but no one's ever asked me that in public, and I really don't want to say. It was a collection of Jeremy Clarkson articles from the newspaper. I remember the cover being green, which actually was probably the right book to start with because it was very digestible. And actually, Abby and I, who's sat behind camera, are just doing the finishing touches on my first book, which we're going to release. And that is very much a collection of articles with reflections on those articles. Maybe that's where the connection came from. But the way I like to read now, I scribble in the margins of what I'm writing in to apply the concept to what we're doing. And I think there's a group of us in the team that will share those books then with. So not only do you get the text, you also get the connection with an idea or thought that we've had here.
Well, that was really interesting. Looking at some of these sort of atlases from the 1400s or 1500s, there were sort of little bits written in the margin,
amazing.
and obviously very nice handwriting, because a lot of them are hand-coloured. But yeah, it's really interesting to see those sorts of
Have you ever
things.
seen the book How to Build a Racing Car, which is the Adrian Newey book?
No, I've not read that.
Joshua Science, I bought him a copy of this. It's my favourite physical form of a book. So the paper's perfect. There's a weight to it, hardback cover. You open it, and it's all Adrian Newey's hand-drawn sketches of each of the cars are reproduced in it throughout the book. And it's just, I've never seen anything like it. It's beautiful. And he's still an old school draftsperson who draws everything. So I think the authenticity of it and all the different sensories, experiences that you describe is why it's amazing. One of the things I really enjoyed hearing you talk about was recognizing clients as partners and people and partnerships. And that's a philosophy we love as well. Can you help us use that as a vehicle to understanding what the culture's like at Knight Frank and how that becomes a reality?
Yeah, I mean, it's all very much around purpose. We have very strong values as a business, and a lot of that comes from the fact that we're independent. I mean, we are a partnership. We don't have shareholders to answer to. So our clients really are our lives. We are sort of dedicated to helping our clients and helping them make the world a better place as well. I mean, a lot of the stuff I do, the sort of thought leadership, the wealth report, the luxury investment index, I mean, it's not necessarily about property or selling our clients' products, but it's understanding the lives that they lead and sort of trying to provide them with sort of useful information. So anyone who buys a nice house from us, obviously they're going to want to put art on the walls, or they might be interested in cars for the garage or wine. So our luxury investment index sort of really taps into that, recognises their lifestyles, and we try to be their sort of partner really, and help them sort of contribute to society, or whether it's working with the younger generation who are really sort of interested in the environment and that kind of thing. So it's all about partnership. It's not sort of like we're just the people who help them with transactions, but we're sort of long-term partners who are with them to help them make the sort of decisions for their families or their businesses, over a long-term period. So that that would be our philosophy, and how we sort of engage with our clients. And for a lot of people, because the partnerships last so long, they don't turn out to be clients. They'll also turn out to be friends as well, which I think is important.
I think it's wonderful. I think the thing that I love about your work especially, I think it's aspirational for everyone. I think it elevates industries and sectors, and certainly I think what you've been able to do when you talk about the environment sector and conservation, it does elevate it and put it alongside the most precious things we have. You talked about the beautiful maps and sort of hand drawings that are there. And as soon as you do that, there's that feeling and sense of wealth and worth and value and longevity. we don't feel that way about the environment so often. Yet it's older than those maps, and it's more precious than those maps, and it's more life sustaining than those maps. So I adore the way you do that. It's such a cool slant on things. Which takes me to the fact that Knight Frank were recently named one of the 50 coolest companies in Britain.
I know, yeah.
What makes a cool British company, Andrew?
It's all about heritage and values, and obviously Knight Frank, we go back to 1896, I think. So we've been around for a long time, and I think people are starting to look at heritage and provenance as being something cool again. I mean, for a period it was all about sort of new startups and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But actually, it's nice to be able to have that kind of history. I mean, you're sort of seeing a return to Savile Row tailoring, aren't you? Sort of Huntsman and all that sort of thing. I mean,
There's a timelessness to that class, isn't there?
I mean, we've done some pretty cool stuff. We sold Stonehenge, for example. We've got amazing clients, and some of the properties that we've sold around the world, are really, really cool. I just bumped into someone in our Baker Street head office. He said, it's all private. Can't talk about what the name of it is, but we're selling a 50,000 acre conservation ranch in Africa. That's really cool stuff. And I've been, lucky enough to visit some of those properties, and we just got some really, really cool clients. And I think, maybe people don't look at real estate as being particularly cool, but we are pretty cool.
I think so. There's always been an association of sort of rural and the country estate and luxury. Does that still persist today, do you think?
I think so, because some of the from the sort of built environment, some of the country houses in the UK, they are the great treasure houses, cultural treasure houses of the country, because their owners, back in the day, they would be exploring the world, going on the grand tours, bringing back some of these sort of amazing objects, but not just physical objects. And if one of the estates in Cornwall where they produce tea, I think it's Tregothnan.
It is.
But
yeah.
They went out and they sort of explored China, brought back all of this sort of the tea varieties, to Cornwall, and grew them and experimented with them and sort of created these amazing gardens. So in my mind, these are sort of, there's a whole combination of luxury there. You've got the sort of the country houses, but you've got the gardens, you've got the sort of the natural environment. So yeah, I mean, the countryside is a sort of whole treasure trove of luxury, I think.
The guest we had in the shoot room earlier today, just before you, was Charlie Courtney, the Earl of Devon. He literally used the exact phrase about that physical house being a treasure trove of things that had come from the family history. It's really fascinating. So you nicely took us on to the natural world and natural capital. Do you remember when you first heard that term?
I can't actually. I don't know. I can't put my finger on when I did hear the phrase natural capital, but I suppose because I've been involved with farmers and landowners for so long, a lot of what they are doing, it's just things that they've done.
It's always there.
They've done conservation because it's just something they do. I mean, it's like, ESG is the sort of the buzz phrase of the moment. But a lot of the things that come within ESG in the rural world are things that have been happening. So, I was writing about renewable energy and all of these sorts of things and conservation projects. And I was visiting farms when I was at Farmers Weekly, conserving the grey partridge and all of these sorts of things. So what they were doing is stuff around natural capital. But I suppose probably about, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or so, when actual natural capital became a phrase, when people started to think that you could actually put a value onto it rather than just something that people did from an altruistic or sort of passionate sort of thing. So I suppose it's really in the last 5 years that it's sort of really gained momentum sort of around nature-based solutions, and you're starting to see a lot more funds, trying to sort of take the value of natural capital and make investors aware of this kind of thing. So yeah, it's probably in the last 5 years that it's something that I've seen other people looking at, but in my own head, it's something that I've always been aware of, and that nature adds a great deal
back to where you grew up.
Great deal of value.
How far away do you think we are until sort of natural capital products, so carbon credits and nature credits are the things that are filling and are being talked about in the wealth report as investment and asset classes?
Well, I was talking about them this year for sure, around how farmland is increasingly being seen as an asset that produces natural capital and nature-based solutions as well as food. So we are, we're already talking about it. I think it's only going to gain in prevalence, but it cuts both ways, doesn't it? People are talking about a lot of this from the perspective of greenwashing, because some of these schemes to sort of, take the value from natural capital in terms of carbon credits actually haven't been or had the integrity that perhaps people thought they did. Some of the buyers thought they did, and now actually, if the Guardian is kind of adept at investigating some of these things and some of these rainforest schemes, and actually people are starting to realise, oh, actually, what I have invested in isn't quite what I was being
it's not holding any water
sold. So I think there's going to be more of a focus on natural capital with integrity, which was
quality, transparency, auditability.
Which was what I wrote about actually. In the wealth report this year, I was asked to, what would you like to invest in? And I think what I said was, nature-based solutions, but nature-based solutions with real integrity, because I think they're going to come under increasing amounts of scrutiny, because sadly not all of these schemes have been marketed as saving the world or whatever have actually stacked up when you look under the bonnet.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's why that has been a big push for us. So we'll be launching our first vintage of carbon credits in this year, which comes from woodland creation projects in Devon and Exmoor and the Yorkshire Dales and on the Welsh coast. And it's really important to us that they are all independently audited, visitable, touchable, feelable, transparent to a potential buyer. And we talked a little bit in the break. Our intention there is to find one single partner buyer to create that partnership exactly as you talk about with your clients and partners, so that they can see it, touch it, feel it, audit it, be completely confident about that partnership. And then also so we can gift them the digital products, the videography, the photography, the association with it, because we need to elevate that asset class to make it luxurious and premium, so the quality's there. Because every time a poor project comes into the market, it sets back the whole natural capital economy. We need to elevate the whole thing. So I want to take us on to a lovely turn of phrase I've seen you use, the joy of ownership and investing with passion. How have you seen that develop in the recent years?
Yeah, but I'm glad you've noticed me using that phrase. That's quite flattering.
Spoiler alert: I really like the way Andrew writes, so I've read quite a few other things.
So I said I set up this index sort of tracking the value of what we call luxury investments. But another way of sort of phrasing that is investments of passion. And each year in the wealth report, we do something. We sort of do our attitude survey, and I ask, why do people collect these kinds of things? And actually, although they are considered investments now, the number one thing is, the passion. It's the joy. It's the joy of ownership. People generally these days do like to buy things that will go up in value, because we're also investment focused where it comes to our houses or whatever. But it's still the passion that really floats their boat. And I think we're seeing that sort of develop into more sort of different aspects of people's lives, because I've written about it before, but I will always say that the ultimate investment of passion is probably something philanthropic. So if you're interested in conservation, it will be the estate that you've bought, whether it's NEP or something in the Karoo or in Kenya or whatever. That is your ultimate investment of passion, because you're really achieving something. You're really changing lives. You're really benefiting the environment. So I think this sort of phrase, joy of ownership, passion, it covers so many things, and it can cover your collection of art. It can cover your collection of classic cars, because these are amazing things to own. But I think the ultimate sort of way that these things do is it goes beyond sort of things that you can collect, but it goes to the world that you can influence, which is why some of these conservationists are such interesting people because they're so passionate about what they're doing. And, you asked earlier about, the link between luxury and rural estates, but, some of these rural estates are really the ultimate investments of passion, because that's what they create, both for you, the communities, the wildlife within that estate.
It was very much an element of the underlying philosophy behind us founding Oxygen Conservation. If you could take that passion, that joy, that commitment, that purpose, and also provide an opportunity for people to get a return on that, so take it from the realms of philanthropy to a genuine alternative asset class, that moves the quantum of investment we need to try and save some of the world, because it's the two uniting forces, the capitalism and the passion and joy there together. So that's what we're hoping to build, and thanks to the amazing support of Oxygen House, we've managed to put together what we think is the country's first genuine £100 million natural capital portfolio, one that is principally bought for the express purpose of positive environmental and social impact. So hopefully when we're sat down here in 12, 24, however many months again, we're able to say we've proved that point, and actually the ultimate investment is in nature, but with a hell of a return that comes alongside of it.
Well, it's important. It's the integrity and it's the provenance. Like, I've been lucky enough just to, before we've chatted, to sort of walk around the Mornicott estate, and you can sort of see it. It's very tangible. I mean, and some people try and create investments that are not so tangible. So during lockdown, NFTs in the art world became a huge thing, but there was no integrity or provenance to it. People were pumping out NFTs using computer algorithms and trying to charge lots of money for them, and people were paying lots of money for them. They were endorsed by celebrities, but since then people have taken a step back and looked at them and thought, actually, there's nothing there. Just because Justin Bieber told me to spend £1 million on a Bored Ape Yacht Club image, actually it is an image of a funny ape. There's no provenance behind it. There's lots of them, and now they're not really worth very much at all. But it was, there was a sort of a rush into this sort of new technology.
It's the speculation versus investment, isn't it? So we spoke about our friend Rob Gardner earlier, who was a previous guest in the shoot room. His amazing book, which is kind of like an intro into investing, Financial Freedom. So it's a great one for people wanting to pick up a first book on finance. And he talks about that is very much speculation. You're hoping, you're guessing, you're not investing. Hopefully, if we can keep that world and make the alternative asset class that is natural capital a genuine investment rather than a speculation, which I think for some in the carbon space, certainly internationally, it's still speculating because there isn't that clarity and that integrity that you talked about. It's also why we try and be as open and transparent as we can, and one of the reasons we started the shoot room sessions, because we want to be different. We want it to be tangible to people. So we say, come and visit us, come and see us. We love the Woodland Carbon Code for what it's done for natural capital markets. But you don't know where your tree is. You can't go see and touch and grab your tree. Carbon is such a concept to people unless you can. So the thing we'll be able to offer is to say, okay, each of the individual trees we've planted for you is geolocated. You can see where it is. Come and visit the estate. Walk the hills, cycle along the path, swim in the rivers. I'm not supposed to invite people to wild swim, but come and wild swim and really experience that landscape and connect with it. And you mentioned the walk around Mornicott earlier. So come this summer, so we're recording in April now, but by sort of June time, this estate will be available for people and businesses to hire in its entirety. So it'll sleep 38, hopefully at a level of quality that is pushing what's possible in this part of Devon. So people can have a private experience in a conservation, genuinely environmentally focused place. So yeah, we're just trying to elevate and open up all our experiences of doing that so everyone can get better with it.
Yeah, I think there's a real lack of understanding between the general public and where their food comes from and where nature comes from. And when you can actually walk around an estate and actually be told what's happening, where, this is what you're going to do with those fields, you're going to perhaps farm them less intensively, get more wildflowers in there, perhaps, let the hedges expand. But all the time, you'll still have animals grazing them at a certain point of time.
They're a key part of conservation, yeah.
There'll still be food producer. It makes the whole thing a lot more understandable.
Real,
for people to sort of get their heads around. And that doesn't seem like greenwashing, and it's not like all the countryside is being rewilded and there won't be any food, but you can actually show that link, that's possible to do both, which I'm very strongly believe in. I'm not, you've got this sort of debate between the sort of land sparing and land sharing, but I do really believe that when the land is managed right, you can do both from it. You can create food, and you can create more habitat for biodiversity and carbon sequestration and all these sorts of things.
If we return to the next generation of investor, the people that are soon going to be inheriting properties and portfolios from people, where are they going to want to see their money invested, do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's something we touched on in the wealth report this year. We're sort of on the cusp of the biggest wealth translation.
I don't think people know that's coming. I think so. Every time it's mentioned, I sort of hear and feel people go, "Oh yeah, that's going to be significant."
Well, I mean, it's trillions of pounds or dollars worth of investable capital that's going to be shifting from between the generations. But I think research that we've done amongst the people we interview for the attitude survey does show that younger generations are more interested in investments that have a bit of impact, whether that's through the natural environment or climate change or whatever. But they are still going to be interested in seeing a return on their investment. No one's going to invest in stuff that doesn't make them money. They'll probably perhaps want a more hands-on approach to their investments. They'll want to know what's going on with them, how their portfolios are being invested in. So they'll want that more hands-on approach. They're probably more interested in their own lives having less of an impact on the world. So the wealth report clearly shows that the younger generation are more open to living more sustainably, whether that's through electric cars or more sustainable houses that they live in. So there will be more of a focus from the younger generation, but they the financial imperatives of making money to sustain their lifestyles will still be there. So they're not going to be 100% altruistic. They're still going to need to see a return.
I feel
on
the
their
exact same way as you do. I think we will see more of that joy and passion and purpose. I think whether it's a 10 or 20% swing to that informing the decision, but I don't think it will be the determining factor. It will just be, I've got an option A or B to invest. I'm prepared to accept a little bit more risk or a slightly lower return to go with my passion and my joy and my purpose.
And I think what we're seeing among some perhaps the wealthier clients is the first introduction for the younger generation into the family business is perhaps helping to manage a sort of family foundation. So looking at the philanthropic aspects of the family, how they help society and communities and conservation and whatever. So I think that will it's often the start of that sort of careers. So that will inform their approach to how they run the family businesses in the future.
Perfect. If we're sat here in what do you already know what's going to feature in next year's wealth report? Do you plan that far ahead?
No idea.
Okay. So if we predict it now, what do you think is going to be in there?
Well, I think we'll be. I mean, it's a really interesting time, isn't it, at the moment, economically and politically. So what I hope we'll be seeing is that the world has become a more normalised place. Interest rates will have come down. Inflation will have been calmed. Perhaps some of the terrible conflicts that we're seeing in the world at the moment will have resolved. That's what I would like to see, and that we'll be investing in a more sort of normal world. But probably not. I don't think some of the conflicts that we're seeing now will have been resolved. So I think we'll still be looking at a world where it's a more difficult place to invest. Where do you put your money? And certainly, climate change is playing a big role in where you invest, because you don't want to be investing in places where, the property might be underwater in the next, 10 or so years.
Higher risk of wildfire, diseases, things like that.
Whether you don't want to be investing in agriculture necessarily in a country that's more prone to drought, unless, you've got plans to maybe do it from a more regenerative perspective and improve your soils and actually increase the resilience. So I'm sort of skirting around your answer your question, because there's so much variability and things that we don't know in the world at the moment.
Political turmoil.
You know, I think we'll probably be talking about, you know, volatility still. You know, the world, you know, interest rates are coming down more slowly than we were hoping, you know, which adds all sorts of interesting angles to the, you know, sort of the world of property and investment. But I think we'll still be talking about natural capital, because that's a developing market, certainly from a farmland perspective. What I'd like to be talking about, you know, is a world where the government has got some more sort of joined up ideas around food production and farming, and is sort of looking at these sort of things in tandem. So, you know, certainly from a UK perspective, we can really, you know, landowners and farmers can really be benefiting from these new income streams while still be producing, you know, high integrity food, because there's so much potential, you know, whether from, you know, soil carbon, but at the moment we don't have a proper, you know, government soil carbon code. So there's all sorts of different schemes that people are looking at, but, you know, so there's no sort of one overarching, you know, sort of layer of government-backed, I don't like to say regulation, but, you know, like the woodland carbon code, the peatland carbon code. You know, it would be great to have a soil carbon code, which would actually give the sort of investors the confidence to, you know, come into these markets. So maybe in a year I'll be writing about that.
Perfect.
Hopefully, but who knows?
We'll do our best to give you a headline of like the coolest natural capital partnership that's happened yet. That's integrity is beyond reproach. Andrew, thank you so much for coming and being part of the shoot room. I've adored having the opportunity to sit and talk to you, and would encourage anyone to read your work. It's certainly taught us a lot along the way. So thank you for coming in again. We appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for having me.
Bye, guys.